Hi, I'm Rick Barron, your host, and welcome to That's Life, I Swear. I have a real passion for reading books. My interest runs across various topics from history, novels. By my last count, I have about, 600 books in my home office. Last year, I even challenged myself to read about 52 books in 1 year, but fell short and only hit 47. I thought that during season 2 of my podcast, I'd take time to share a book review on some of the books I've read, and hope that some of the books will pique your interest. So let's kick this off with a recently read book titled Adrift by Scott Calloway, someone who's been labeled as the Howard Stern of the business world. Okay, so let's first talk about the book. I've been reading Scott's books over, 4 or 5 years, but his new book, Adrift, provides a very vivid picture of taking the United States under the microscope, showing us the direction of the future of this country and how we got to where we are today. Now, we're still climbing out of the COVID-19 nightmare, and we're only beginning to deal with our post-pandemic future. Only one looks around, you can see several balls in the air that presents a very complex picture. Now, what do I mean by that? Right now, our country is dealing with political extremism that continues to fester. A workforce going through the great resignation, impacting business everywhere. And the ongoing supply chain issues affecting economies not just in the United States, but worldwide. Now, don't get me started with the Ukraine war, the state of inflation in the US and around the world, tech companies now dealing with heavy layoffs. I mean, brother, we'll be here all day. In Scott's book, he tells us that as a nation, we're asking ourselves about the state of our democracy. Over the past couple of years, we realized just how fragile it really is. I mean, who would have thought this would be a topic of mine at this point in this country? Now, technology moves at such a fast clip that our heads spin. No sooner do we get adjusted to something like G4 technology that we're now introduced to G5. Change is good, but at what cost? Having job security was once thought of as a sure bet. Not anymore. As the years go by, but more so the months, the United States is going through a massive change. And Scott says it's more of a tsunami, distort the mechanism of our economy, and jolt the financial backbone of this country, the middle class. Scott has put a stake in the ground in his book, beginning in 1945 to the present day. With this timeline, Scott tells a very compelling picture via 100 charts, which are very simplistic, but rather it drives the point home, accompanied by his very tough love narrative that brings the charts to life. Scott tells us that as a nation, we got to come to grips with what we are facing and not take this defeatist attitude, but to stand up and tackle what's in front of us. History showed us that between 1945 and 1980, America was a nation at a crossroads. Now, as Scott put it, here we go again. So let's talk about the man. Who is Scott Calloway? Well, Scott was born on November 3rd, 1964. He's a clinical professor of marketing at the New York University Stern School of Business. Besides walking the halls of academia, he's a public speaker, an author. He also runs 2 podcast programs, which you can find on my website in the show notes, and I'll provide you the links to those podcasts. And he's also an entrepreneur. He grew up in Los Angeles, California. His father was a Scottish immigrant to the United States who worked as a sales executive. His mother, an immigrant too, worked as a secretary. Scott attended the University of California, Los Angeles, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics in 1987. And then he went on to UC Berkeley, getting his MBA at the Haas School of Business in 1992. He was elected to the World Economics Forum's Global Leaders of Tomorrow, which recognizes 100 individuals under the age of 40 whose accomplishments have been impacted on a global level. Needless to say, Scott is an accomplished academic, and he's well-versed in understanding the business environment and economics. Calloway also teaches brand management and digital marketing to second-year MBA students. Now, what drew me to this book? I've been a follower of Scott's books for several years now, not to mention following his podcasts. Now, the man doesn't mix words, and he has a real unique way of cutting through the fluff and providing clear and crisp information. I mean, there's just no ambiguity with this guy. He can be harsh, but he speaks in a very simplistic and the truth hurts manner, which I really like. As mentioned at the beginning, his new book, Adrift, walks you through about 100 charts covering decades of data and hypotheses of what the graphs mean and why the United States is in the state that it's in today. Scott sees the nation experiencing a crisis, divided by inequality, economic decline, partisan anger, and rising extremism that's getting worse by the day. Now, you may disagree with his assessments, but he has the data to back up his claims. Now, what can we learn from this book? What's the takeaway? Well, with Scott, the truth is in the pudding. His book is a bullhorn telling this country to get a grip and wake up to reality. His commentary on each chapter provides a practical and serious eye-opener to how our country got stuck in the mud. But there's a way out. As you get towards the end of the book, Scott provides some insight on how we can get back on our feet again. As I said earlier, Scott gives us tough love, and right now we need it. Adrift is a read that will affect the way you think about where we are as a nation today, but also give insight that there is a way out. Well, there you go. That's life, I swear. For further information regarding the material covered in this episode, I invite you to visit my website, which you can find on either Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, for show notes calling out key pieces of content mentioned in this episode and also the episode transcript itself. As always, I thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe here or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss an episode. See you soon.